Before that time.
The physics behind, for example,
another
the reactions,
question people
the
may
reaction, the actual change in
under
mass.
the ultimate question about
During
profit
over the course of the
investment,
7 years
now
the book was put together.
Welcome to the Scholars Chair. Tonight, a conversation with Dr. Mark J Hubley. He is a professor and the chair of the Department of Natural Sciences and Engineering at Prince George's Community College. Our topic, the importance and relevance of studying biology. What is biology? What are the many social, economic, and political problems that a student of biology can potentially solve? Our discussion will start right here with Dr. Hubley.
Let the conditions of inequality that we suffered under, when we are the oppressor, the dominant class, let's not impose that injustice on the others.
Anybody think that you could have a just system without giving women their rights?
Everyone has an opinion, and we sit around the marketplace and talk about opinion, but what is truth?
With the shareholder, their goal is similar to the business, to maximize profit.
That belief becomes a context for a development of knowledge.
Say physics is the DNA of technology because the rules for how you build new technology starts in physics.
Because Quran challenges the people. It's not only the people of the book, it challenges Muslims.
We say secular, they hear godless.
Right.
What was intended?
Watch the Scholars Chair every Monday night. Dr. Mark J Hubley, you have on your resume a PhD from Florida State University, and your Bachelor's of Science is from Wake Forest University. Is that correct?
Correct.
Welcome to the Scholars Chair.
Thank you.
You know, our program is about biology, the study of biology, but we don't really know what it is. What is biology?
So biology is simply the study of life. Easy to say that's simple, but it obviously encompasses a very broad area. So from humans and other animals to plants to bacteria to how they evolve, to how they interact with each other, how they interact with the environment.
Yes, and how human beings fit in all that
Correct.
as well. Yes, I was curious, what is the accepted definition for life as we know it in modern times?
Rather than a straightforward definition, most sources you'd find would give you a list of somewhere between 5 and 8 or so characteristics of living things. They're going to, depending on the source, they're going to range from complexity. So the simplest thing that we would consider a living thing is much more complex than any naturally occurring non-living thing. So complexity, the ability to reproduce is something, a characteristic of living things. The ability to metabolize, so to take in food, energy, metabolize it. Homeostasis, which means to maintain some kind of consistency in the living thing. Responding to stimuli, so those are some examples of characteristics that make something we would consider a living thing.
What is the notion of adapting? How does that fit into the evolutional process?
So, with reproduction goes adaptation.
Yeah.
So, going back to Darwin, living things leave offspring. And the whole survival of the fittest generally tends to apply. So the environment is going to change no matter what. One way or another, the environment's going to change, and for a for a species to persist in that environment, it's going to have to adapt.
If the creationist asked you the question, would make the statement, I should say, that scientific theory is just a theory, what would be your response?
So a theory, there are various words, hypothesis, theory, idea, that people can conflate, mix up. When a scientist uses the word theory, we're pretty much saying this is something that has been around and been supported by a lot of evidence. I think any good scientist would say any theory is subject to change. Any good scientist should always have an open mind. But
But theory is not guesswork. Okay?
Theory is not a guess, right? No. So
we'll get that out the way. So theory is this combination of facts that turns into what we understand to be a theory, right?
Correct.
Yes, sir. Tell me about why study biology. There are people who invested their entire lives studying biology, and I was just looking through the history of biology, and we're going back thousands of years almost, back to Aristotle.
Absolutely, yeah. So, so I'll start with something pragmatic. So there are a lot of good careers out there. So one reason to study biology is there are plenty of good biology-related careers, from medicine, nursing, health, pharmacy to research, being a naturalist, being forest conservation, park ranger. One thing a lot of people probably aren't aware of is that the path I took, which is a graduate degree in biology, I was paid by the university to be a student. So you hear a lot about how much debt people acquire going to medical school or going through other career paths in the hard sciences, biology, chemistry, physics. Typically the universities will pay graduate students, pay their tuition and pay them to teach undergraduate laboratories and do research. So that's a good opportunity for somebody, or so somebody may not realize they can become a biologist and not have to pay for graduate school.
I love it.
For me, it was mainly just a love of nature. So from the time I was a kid in Montgomery County with some woods behind my house, I wanted to spend every minute I could out in the woods catching turtles and snakes and playing and doing that sort of thing.
So natural curiosity and got you started.
Yes.
Yeah, interesting. I remember the gentleman who actually discovered DNA strands. I was trying to remember the gentleman's name, Watson and Clark, is it?
Watson and Crick.
Crick, right.
They did not technically discover DNA.
Okay.
They figured out how it works for heredity, but
Sure. That's better. But it seems to me they had a real love and curiosity to just find out how things work. And I think that most students are like that. While we're talking about this science, let's just talk about what are the steps to the scientific method.
Okay, so again, if you were to look at 5 different sources, you might see 5 slightly different takes on this, but it's going to start with identifying a question or a problem. So something that spurs your interest. From there, you typically develop a hypothesis. So make an educated guess, come up. So that is kind of a educated guess as to what's going on. And then probably maybe the most critical part is to then test that hypothesis experimentally. Once you've tested the hypothesis, gathered data, analyze the data, and then pretty much you're at a fork in the road. Either the data support your hypothesis, in which case you could possibly collect more data or go forward with it. If your data don't support the hypothesis, then it's up to you to refine your hypothesis or come up with a completely new hypothesis. I'll give you a quick example. I live on a farm, and in front of our house we have a garden with some knockout roses. And then in front of the barn we have some few hundred yards away we've got some knockout roses. The ones in the garden in front of the house get torn up by Japanese beetles in the summer. I've never seen a Japanese beetle on the ones by the barn. So there's a question for me why. I haven't really come up with a hypothesis. So somewhere out there's probably money to be made in developing a remedy for Japanese beetles, but I haven't pursued it yet.
I love it. It seems to me that, as you just mentioned, there's a number of professional opportunities being a biologist. Can you name another one that you find most frequently people go into?
I'll say at the community college, I personally teach human anatomy and physiology and biochemistry, and by far the majority of the students that pass through my classes are pursuing careers in nursing. So that's one I see that's very popular around here, and I'm sure you've heard all the news about the demand for health professionals to support the aging population.
That's exactly right. And I would think that biological literacy is essential, isn't it? Just to be able to function in this society. And we were just talking earlier to at least verify whether global warming is actually a thing or not.
Right.
And to be able to sort out all the data that we get from the political type as well as multimedia. And, and how do one analyze all that data and separate fiction from...
I'm sure a lot of people manage to get through life without a strong knowledge in biology. The state of Maryland and Prince George's Community College require, to get an associate's degree, require that you have some science, although they do not specify biology. So you can be a graduate of Prince George's Community College without taking a course in biology. That being said, you could go through life without reading To Kill a Mockingbird, or you could go through life without knowing how to balance a checkbook. I wouldn't recommend either.
Right. And you can go through life stupid. That's what you're saying. Okay.
Well, I didn't quite say that, but yeah, I think to really be a functioning citizen, having at least a fundamental knowledge of biology is fairly essential.
Yes.
Knowing how your body works, knowing how the environment works.
Yes, one of the classes I attended, you were asked to interpret the ingredients on the label of a package, with milligrams being the challenge there, and it was for me it was very important just to determine how much is this food that they're actually talking about when they're saying 39 milligrams of carbohydrates is what I'm usually looking at. So to have knowledge of what the body is doing in terms of the amount of stuff that is burning up is critical, I would think, for good health.
Right, and we were discussing, biology is way too big a subject that you're going to know it all. But to have the foundation of the basics, whether it's biology or there are various fields where you learn to appreciate critical thinking, where you hopefully learn how to evaluate what's a reliable source, what's not a reliable source. And in the world we live in today, there are lots of sources of information, and a big part of navigating life today is to know whether that source is a valid source or not.
Yeah, so maybe something from Johns Hopkins would be better than the pool hall downtown, I guess.
Correct.
Curious. I am curious that whether the huge packaging of consumable items that come at us daily, I'm just amazed that it place huge obstacles in our way in assessing what actually happens biologically to our bodies. It seems to me that they show us a lot of these wonderful images, but they really don't get down to the secular level or the atomic level and to find out what is actually going on.
Snake oil salesmen have been around for a long time. People usually use that phrase as if it's a historical thing. They're still there.
They're still there.
And there are a lot of people trying to sell things and make money off of people. Usually there's a kernel of, or sometimes there's a kernel of truth in what they're saying. Something that comes to mind, have you heard of the Paleo Diet?
No, I have not. Tell us about it.
So for a couple of years, I've come across that there's this idea, the Paleo Diet, to eat things that human beings ate, when they were cavemen or something, and when they were in their natural environment, and eat natural foods and nuts and meat and things that a caveman would have eaten, roughly. And that sounds kind of good, natural, eat natural things when humans were living in nature. The one thing I think of as a biologist is back 30,000 years ago or whatever, the life expectancy of a person was, if they made it through infancy, was probably 30 years old. So nature doesn't care whether we live a nice, full, healthy life into our 70s or 80s. Yeah. So while eating natural foods may be okay, just the fact that it's natural doesn't mean it's going to help you achieve the goal of living. So many things that, we have a life expectancy in the 70s or 80s today because we're not doing things the way that were done 30,000 years ago.
Let me ask you, are kids concerned about pain medication, opioids, that sort of thing? I don't know why that comes to mind, but that seems to be something that is in the news quite often. And I was curious whether the study of biology would help them to deal with this problem. Other than it'll kill you.
Yeah, I guess my initial reaction is that I think something like, not my area of expertise, but addiction and opioids, I think that's something where I don't know how much the knowledge helps there. I think maybe from the perspective of people trying to treat it and remedy the situation, but you know, does a 20-year-old listen and make those? I don't know. Or somebody who is older and has been suffering with back pain or something and taking. So I don't know that I would necessarily see the link.
The link there. Yeah. Well, I'm glad you could help me out in determining what's a real question of that. How can biology help us to actually make better economic decisions? I'm just curious.
Yeah. Thinking. Yeah, knowing something about the environment, knowing what you're doing on a daily basis, how that impacts things, I think it certainly helps. So biology has me thinking about recycling, doing things like so on a personal economic level, I guess. I pay some attention to how I drive, you know, the cars. I try not to just leave a car sitting there running. I try to turn lights off. You know, and part of that, I think, is my appreciation for trying to do something, some little part to do my part to conserve the environment we live in.
Yes, you know, we have been talking earlier about some of the new studies in biology we talked about earlier, and you mentioned the fact that there were people who were working at boosting our immune systems to help combat cancer, I think is your response.
Yep, so one area that's getting a lot of attention right now, well, it's emerging, I think, right now, is looking at ways to use the immune system, or stimulate the immune system to better fight cancer. This is not a new idea. This is an idea that's been out there for at least 20 years, maybe more, but is maybe just starting to come into its own, where there are some treatments along these areas that are getting used, getting approval. There's no better thing that humans have ever invented or anything at killing a cancer cell than your own immune system. And the trick is that sometimes your immune system doesn't recognize that you have a particular cancer. So there's a lot of research out there about trying to either stimulate the immune system to recognize that cancer and kill it, or do something to the cancer cells to make them easier targets for the immune system.
Interesting. That sounds like an area that a student who is interested can go in and make a contribution. In the notion of defining biology, there are so many different areas. The natural sciences. You're talking about the study of organisms, physical structure, chemical processes, interactions throughout the body and throughout plant life and animal life. Tell me, what is the study of natural sciences? Is that a study in and of itself?
So when 2 years ago, the Department of Biological Sciences at Prince George's Community College was merged with what was called the Department of Physical Sciences, which was chemistry, physics, or the Department of Physical Sciences and Engineering. So it was chemistry, physics, and astronomy. And we had to come up with a name and for the new department. And I'm sure there are some different uses here. The term natural sciences to me means the sciences like biology, chemistry, physics that look to investigate and understand the natural world. I would contrast that with, we have a area of the college, social sciences, which would typically encompass psychology, sociology, economics, I imagine, maybe I'm missing some others. So I think the common theme behind biology, chemistry, and physics is understanding the natural world in which we live.
Yes, makes good sense. Now, there's also work to be done in research and development, and it seems that theoretical research, or theoretical biology is called, that people who like to gather data and put it into books and journals have a place here, I would think. Theoretical biology, what is that as a discipline? You know?
That's a term I'm not
Yeah.
familiar with.
Well, I've heard of theoretical physics, and
Right.
that is somebody who can actually think out of the box, so to speak, and deal with biological problems that like I remember so well, George Washington Carver, who talked about going for long walks in a grass field, and he would see plant life, and he saw chemistry in just observing these plants, and he thought not only of those plants as they were in the natural world, but what they could be turned into, like paint and medicines for people. And so I can appreciate it from that particular vantage point.
I've probably been spending too much time as a department chair doing administrative work. And,
that's one of the stories I remember because I have a great love for George Washington Carver. Tell me about we mentioned the study of biology to help us understand the problems of economics. Tell me about how they address social issues. We have a lot of issues in our society that people have opinions about various things, heredity and so forth. Tell us how that's helping us better understand that area.
So, in a time when in certain areas of government we want to turn an eye away from these things, but
yes.
So an example you mentioned earlier, global warming.
Yes.
There are a lot of people studying and seeing effects of change.
Yes.
As a biologist, and my knowledge of the topic, the climate is changing. The climate on this planet has changed before. It will change again, and there's probably nothing we can do about that fact. Now, the question isn't so much, is the climate changing? It's a question of how much are we accelerating that change? And that's something I think most scientists believe we are doing something to it.
Yes. Yes.
And one thought that comes to my mind here and there is, I think sometimes people want to criticize environmentalists as, well, trying to save the planet or whatever. I'm happy for the planet to be saved. On the other hand, it is about humans as well. We are adapted. We use the word. We are adapted to living in the world as it exists.
Yeah. Yeah.
If that world, the planet will go on. The planet has gone on for however many billion years. The question is it going to be hospitable for human beings? Is it going to be a place where we can thrive? And biology certainly addresses that. Health issues, medical, biology plays into all the issues with health. I forget what the number is, but how much money is spent in healthcare on a person's last 6 months or something of life, and that comes down to ethics as well as informed, biological decisions.
It crosses a lot of territory. Tell me about where you come down on the challenge to evolution. I mean, this is a favorite topic of mine.
So, first off, I would say that the typical Darwinian theory of evolution starts with life existing as the starting point. So, biological evolution per se does not say how life got created. It says that the life that has been here has changed.
Gotcha.
So the origin of life itself is a different matter, and there are some theories about chemical changes to chemicals reacting, and that's tough for me, even as a biologist, to get a handle on how you get from chemicals to the first cell.
Yes.
And one other characteristic of life is all life is based on cells. Now, I think, in my opinion, it's undeniable that life has been existing on this planet for some couple billions of years. Yes. Life we'd be more familiar with for a few hundred million years, and it has changed. Yes. I don't think God put the skeletons of dinosaurs 500 feet underground just to throw us off track and confuse us.
Yes, yes.
So, we see evolution occurring today over smaller, and the evidence that life has been on this planet for a long time and changed over time, in my opinion, is it's
so evolution is a reality.
Evolution is a reality.
Yes. Yeah. I'm glad that you said that, because I'm sure that as soon as Scholars Chair is over, somebody will ask me about the evolution. Yeah. Dr. Hubley, the world of biology is challenging every aspect of our human society, and I appreciate you coming on the program, sharing some light on the subject. I also noticed that you have but you have contributed a number of articles to the world of knowledge, biology. Would you name a couple of them?
It's been a while. So so I mentioned before, as a child, I was interested in biology in terms of fish and frogs and snakes and things. Sure. When I got to graduate school, somehow I ended up becoming a biochemist and doing experiments in the basement of the chemistry building, but did examine how the muscle tissue in fish changes in response to changes in temperature. As a Marylander, you might appreciate we have rockfish that in the summertime they're swimming in water that may be 80 degrees, and they may migrate to some degree, but still in the winter they may be living someplace where the water temperature is 40 degrees.
That's natural curiosity. What book would you recommend for a student to read to get more information on biology?
I would start off saying not a book necessarily. I'm a big fan of the Tuesday Washington Post Health and Science section.
Cool.
I think that's a great place to start. There's a lot of health, but they cover a lot of different areas, and in my opinion, generally reliable sources. There's a website called sciencedaily.com, which is a good site. For a book, and I haven't read as many as I would like to lately, but a couple years ago read The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks by Rebecca Skloot. Love that book. It's historical. It's talking about events that happened in the 1950s largely.
Wow.
But it still gives a perspective on science and how science works, the good, the bad.
And a story worth reading.
A very good story worth reading, yeah. Dr.
Hubley, thank you for coming to the Scholars Chair. You have guided us to the end of it, and I hope that everyone who's curious in biology would take Dr. Hubley's recommendation on the books that he's suggested for us. Tonight we've been talking to Dr. Hubley, and he is the Prince George's Chair, and he has brought to us a discussion on the importance of studying biology. If you want to know more Scholars Chair, you want to see more Scholars Chair, go to read1communications.com. I am Khalil Shadid. Good night.
Hit it, hit it, hit it, hit it. amazing.